Hello, and thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of Outside the Box. For those of you who follow me regularly, you know last week my show was canceled. I was supposed to have a couple on, and we were going to talk about blended families. So my apologies for that. You know, stuff comes up, that's life. But I'm back again this week with a new guest and a live show, and I hope to reschedule the last guest for last week at a later time. Because I really think blended families is an important topic that needs to be discussed as well, especially from a Christian perspective. And so, but today, so a little bit of, I got to run off the list of to-dos. And so the first thing is, it's me, Sage, the coach from Outside the Box. My show helps to try to help people see God from a deeper perspective, because we often put God in a box when we are going through life. And a lot of times it makes us miss him in our lives and our relationships, his blessings and things like that. And so I know throughout my Christian walk, which I have been a Christian for almost 20 years, God never came to me the way that I expected. He never revealed things to me that was not shocking to me. And so I really think it's important that we learn to see God outside of our boxes in order to really grow spiritually. And so my show usually airs Saturdays at 12 p.m. My live shows, I do sometimes do reruns and have pre-recorded shows and things like that, but that's usually the layout. And please, you guys, like and share my page with anybody that you think might be interested in my content. Because, you know, if I'm going to encourage people to see outside of their boxes, they need to see the show. So if they don't see the show, then they kind of miss a chance to get some insight into their own situation. So please like, follow, share. I also ask people sometimes to invite people to my page. So if you go under the communities tab on my page and scroll down, you will see a button for inviting people to my page. That's usually much more effective than just kind of sharing it and things like that. So please make sure you do that. I do have a lot of great shows coming up for the following this year and for next year. And so speaking of that, my show falls on Christmas this year. And so I am going to do a special. Actually, I'm going to do a Christmas special and a New Year's special, where I'm going to be talking to past guests about the lessons that they have learned this year. And so at the end of the year, you know, at the beginning of the year, we always have our New Year's resolutions. And that usually stems from what we went through the past year, or things that we didn't accomplish or we want to accomplish from last year. And so I think it's very important to reflect on the past year before you go into the new year. So I will be doing a Christmas special on that and a New Year special. Again, just talking to previous guests about really big life lessons they have learned in 2021. And also on my Christmas show, I will be doing a giveaway. So you all, please be sure to sign up for my giveaway. I'm giving away some books, some Amazon gift cards, some coaching packages. So please sign up for the giveaway if you are interested in any of those things. And I will notify you by email if you've won. And so I will post the link in the comments so you guys can go ahead and sign up for that. And I think that's it for my announcement. So now it's time to introduce my guest. I'm doing stuff a little bit differently today because this is the first guest that I've had, a Christian author, a Christian fiction author, where we're going to be talking about her book called Stories for the Urban Soul. The book is really interesting. It revolves around Black culture and our experiences with God based on, you know, our unique life experiences and things like that. I really was inspired and touched by the book. You know, with fiction, for me, it always kind of inspires creativity and thoughts, and her book definitely does that. So I will go ahead and bring my guest out, whose name is Nicole D. Miller. Here she goes. Here you go. Hello, how you doing?
Hi, Sage, the coach. I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. How you doing? I do want to thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know it takes time out of your day, so thank you again for that.
It is definitely an honor. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no problem. So your book. So first, what I wanted to talk about, well, let me go rewind. So we're here to talk about your book, Stories of the Urban Soul. But before we get into that, I want the guests to know who you are. So can you just introduce yourself a little bit, what you do? I know you're not just an author, you also have your own business and things like that. So if you can let everybody know who you are and what you do, that would be great.
Sure. So I am Nicole D. Miller, and I actually do have two businesses. I have a bookkeeping business called ABN Bookkeeping, and I help small business owners record financial transactions using QuickBooks. I also do taxes for individuals and small businesses, so tax season's coming up. And then I have my authorship business, Nicole D. Miller Publishing LLC. So I have three books, all self-published. The first one is How to Overcome Heartbreak, Recovering from Misguided Love. The sequel is How to Overcome Heartbreak, Stories That Heal. And then the latest book is Stories for the Urban Soul.
Okay, wow. So how long have you been a writer?
That's a good question. So I would say when I started my blog back in 2012, I started blogging at betterthanwine.net. And that is when I started really using my skill of writing.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, blogging.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so before that, you were not like for me, I've been writing since I was a kid. So for those of you who
Mm-hmm.
are who are watching, not only am I a certified life and relationship coach, but before all of that, I was an author. I've been writing since I was a kid. I do have some published books as well, but I've been writing since I was about 7 or 8 years old. So, but that's not the case with you, it sounds like.
Definitely, I remember doing like a little story in school that I was really proud of, but the most that I would say is I was an avid reader. So I loved reading as a kid, and I didn't know that reading, being an avid reader, makes someone a good writer. So
Exactly,
I feel
exactly.
like God was just kind of setting me up because I love to read. I loved writing in English, but it was college where I ended up majoring in business. Now, I did for a split second become a journalism major. I was struggling with my business courses and I was like, well, I'm good at writing, I'll do journalism, but he redirected me and I ended up pursuing business. So I wasn't like pursuing writing as a career. I just knew it was a gift that I had, but never did I foresee that it would like take off the way that it has and where it's going.
Wow, that's amazing. So,
Yeah.
Jay Lewis just tuned in. He said, "Good afternoon, good afternoon, Jay Lewis. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to like and share this program with anybody you think might be interested in it." So, but wow, that's really, really interesting. So, so what is your inspiration for writing? Because especially since you have not necessarily been doing it since you're young, and you are correct that reading definitely helps with your writing. I've seen that even in my own kids, they started reading very, very young, and it just kind of naturally transitioned over into writing skills. And so I agree with you on that. But there's a lot of people that can write. And I always say the essence of a good writer is somebody who has something to say. So you can be a great writer technically, but if you don't have anything to say, then it's kind of defeats the purpose of writing. So what is your motivation for writing?
I would say it started off with my blog, and it was just a way to connect with God and to connect with people who are on a similar path.
Mm.
So initially, I was reading a lot of blogs with people who had a similar journey as me with faith or, background with family structures and ethnicity and all that stuff. And then when I started doing my blog, it was a way to like connect with God. It was a way to share these faith-filled experiences I was having with God and what my journey looked like back then. So initially, it was my relationship with God that inspired me, having no idea that when I published the blog post, How to Overcome Heartbreak, Recovering from Misguided Love, it would inspire so many people and they would respond. And God was like, this is the name of your first book. Bless
Mm.
you.
Thank you.
So the fact that a blog post is what capitalized me into or catapulted me into writing, just I don't know, it's out the box, like you
Yeah.
said. Like I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
never, I'm such a linear person, ABCD, like go to school, get your degree, get a corporate job. So that's how I was thinking things would go, but it was very mundane during that time in my career, and that's when writing got birthed out of the standstill, and God was using my circumstances to help me look outside the box, help me look at something else that he wanted to bring forth.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing story. And so now for your this book, the stories of the urban soul. When did this book get published, or how long did it take you to write
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. So, okay. So even though I had published two books, I still didn't see myself as a writer per se. I still didn't see, because, I'm like, well, I didn't go to school for that. I
Mm-hmm.
just did these books because that's what the Lord led me to do, and there was a need for it. But I started doing short stories, I think in 2017. I went to a writer's workshop, and like you said, when you were reading, it inspired your creativity. Being in those workshops and being around other writers like inspires me, it stirs me up, and even when I'm reading good writing, it stirs my gift up.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to this workshop and was surrounded by these real writers, in my view, and wrote my first short story, and one of the writers in there reviewed it, and she had an amazing novel. I remember reading some of her novel, and she was like, Nicole, it's good, but it's too long. And so back then, I didn't understand the concept of a short story because I was just going.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kept that short story, and I revamped it a little bit, but for the most part, it's still the exact same length. And I wrote two more short stories after, and then I stopped writing completely. And I went through a passing of a loved one, and it was interesting because during my time of grief, I started reading fiction. Like you said, you weren't really reading fiction for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but fiction was like safe because it wasn't drama, trauma heavy. It wasn't anything deep or serious
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
nonfiction can be. I just needed an outlet to escape while I was dealing with that grief.
Okay.
But it was in writing the fiction that, again, God was teaching me fiction. And it was probably around that time, I do remember writing a couple more short stories, but it wasn't until the pandemic. So it was once the
Wow.
pandemic happened in 2020, I had more time, I had flexibility, and I started writing again. And there was an opportunity for unagented Black authors to submit their work for a traditional publishing company. And they had a deadline that they wanted it by September 2020. So God had kept bringing that opportunity my way from different sources. And I was like, okay, I got to get this book done or this amount done by this time. So that was my goal. So I'm working feverishly to finish it, but I did submit it, but it come to find out that wasn't the genre. My book didn't fall into the genres they accepted. But I
Okay.
think God used that because of his timing of when he wanted this book to come out. Because I would have just sat on it because I already
Mm-hmm.
started these stories
Mm-hmm.
years prior. I'm just having fun. I mean,
Exactly.
I didn't know that this was going to be as serious as it's gotten. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, I got an editor. She did an amazing job, but when she first saw it, I thought I was just ready to go and publish it. She said, no, there's more, sit with it. And she was right, and I did, and more came out of me. And it wasn't until months after she even published it that I finally, or she even edited it, that I finally felt like the time is now. And I published it in May of 2021. So
Wow,
it's
of this year. Wow.
of this year. So it's been a process, but I have to look back and say like, wow, this was his timing because number one, I was really chill about it. I
Mm-hmm.
just was doing it for fun. I thought I was just writing, these short stories for fun. But the cool thing is that very first short story that the lady in the workshop reviewed is Lisa's story. And that since you've read my book, Lisa is the very first story in Urban Stories. So
Okay.
even though she said, oh, it's too long, it's like, well, she didn't understand I was going to have it in a compilation. And so
Okay.
that's why the book says a compilation of short stories, novellas, and poetry, because technically Lisa's story and a few of others are novellas because they're a little longer.
Okay. Okay. Wow. So I mean, with and I like what you're saying about the fiction writing because um God is a storyteller. Jesus told parables all the time, and I think that comes from. I mean, I think storytelling is a tool that God uses to teach us. And so, when we're trying to look at our own lives from our own perspective, it gets very blurred because we're biased against ourselves. And as the Bible talks about, everything we do is right in our eyes, and so we kind of biased when it comes to us. But it's when you hear a story where you are able to kind of take a different perspective and look at it through somebody else's eyes, that it helps you to be able to reflect back on your own situation. And so I really think there's a lot of power behind, fiction writing and storytelling, and it's definitely a way to teach us. And that really came across in your stories and what you do. Like for me, when I write, it's always a lesson in there, so I kind of don't, it's not, I kind of lack creativity if I can't revolve it kind of around a lesson. So I really noticed that in your writing. Okay, Jay Lewis says, so true, say, yes, he is absolutely a storyteller. And then we also have Stephanie. I'm just gonna say Stephanie because I don't want to pronounce her
Harriet.
last name wrong. Yeah, Harriet. Shit. And thanks for tuning in, Stephanie. My real name is Stephanie also. So thanks for tuning in. Okay, so let me go back to what I was saying. Sometimes the comments can be a little bit distracting, but it's podcast stuff, so you deal with it.
No problem.
So with your stories, like, I really like how well, first of all, let people know, give a summary about what the story is about, because we talked about short stories, novellas, and a compilation. So can you give people just a synopsis of what the book is about?
Sure. So Stories for the Urban Soul is a compilation of short stories depicting Black characters dealing with everyday life issues, from social injustices to college life to parenting, divorce, just relatable topics that we can all, relate to. And it has a spiritual undertone. So it's encouraging, it's hope filled, it has, relationships with God and transformation and healing. And so it's been amazing for me to be able to combine like both of those worlds, my love for Black culture, my love for God, and just seeing God in African American culture.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you talk about, because I think this is really interesting, because I was listening to a sermon about T.D. Jakes a few weeks ago, and he talks about how God speaks to you through your environment or through your culture, what like a lot of times, of course, the Bible talks about coming out of the world and not being separate, but culture, God also respects our culture as well. He doesn't automatically expect you to throw away all the teaching and stuff that you have learned throughout your lifetime in order to follow him, so to speak, but he uses those things to teach you who he is. And so I really like how you infuse Black culture with that, because of course God transcends all cultures, but he can use your culture and your specific experience to teach you certain lessons about who you are and who he is, and help you grow spiritually. And I really got that feel in what you were writing. So what do you think about that?
I definitely agree. I feel like in my faith, my journey was, and probably a lot of people could relate to this. I shied away from my culture. I shied away from the music. I shied away from certain vernacular. I shied away from certain events and circumstances. And I don't necessarily think that was a negative thing. I think God was building a foundation. He wanted to make sure that eternity was going to be first, and my culture, my earthly culture, was going to be second, because it was about identity. So he wanted me to understand your identity is first spiritual and then natural, but it still has its place. So now that I'm more mature, his way with me has been, okay, now that you know who you are, I can acclimate you accordingly in the culture. And I think it relates to that scripture, being in the world but not of it. It's like, okay, so we're not of the world, but we're still in it.
Exactly.
And God is still in it. He's in the moon, he's in the stars, he's in the animals, he's in nature. And so once the eyes of our heart are open, we can see that. We see that in his people. I think of Moses, who was taken out of his own family and then reacclimated to the Hebrews. Jesus came as a Jew. So our culture, our race, our ethnicity has its place. It's understanding that it's used to spread the gospel. I feel like Nicole, my skin color, my gender, that my interest, hopefully is demonstrating this is what Jesus looks like through Nicole.
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean I'm perfect, but it's like, well, this is a glimpse of who he is through me, because I am a part of him.
Exactly.
All ethnicities, all races, all languages are a part of him.
Exactly.
And so as we all come together and express the varieties of ethnicities, then we can get a glimpse of like who he is in his entirety. That's my view of it.
Look, oh wow, that was very, very beautifully said, and I totally agree. And too often we kind of, because like you said, all of it is God. It's just like tiny pieces. Like we are all just kind of tiny pieces of God. And so often you get people who just want to hold on to the peace of God that they can understand. And this goes into outside the box, that they label anything outside of that as bad or that is not God or anything like that. But God is in everything. And when you put on the correct lenses, like you're saying, and start seeing things through spiritual eyes, you really can see all the pieces of him that kind of fit together to create our reality and to create the human race, which is, I mean, it's like if all of these people are pieces of God and everything in life can be seen through a spiritual lens to understand him, God must be massive. Like, oh my goodness. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, he's smart. He's creative. He's
Right.
yeah, he's just so many things. So
And the word I
absolutely.
would use is God is fly, right? So like I feel
Yeah.
like for me, like God was like, you're fly because I'm fly. And
Yeah,
so in my
exactly.
spiritual journey with him, he's like, let me get your hair together, let me get your nails together, let me get this outfit for you. And he literally would pick these things out for me. Like that is the in tuneness that I know that I have with him. But people who can't think outside the box, that would be off-putting for them. They would be
Yeah.
like, he don't care about your hair. And I told my pastor, I had got a new wig and I showed my pastor and I was so excited about it. And he was laughing at me. And I was like, but if God numbers the hairs on our head, how
Exactly.
he's gonna care about our wigs. He ain't say it had to come from your head. Like he care about all your hair, even the
Yeah, he
one you
did.
purchased.
Yes,
I'm just
exactly.
saying.
Exactly. Yeah, because everything has a spiritual root. And so he totally understands all of that. So I totally agree. So Armia, if I'm pronouncing your name right, says, good afternoon. Nicole, have you thought about doing a children's book?
That is actually my cousin. So funny.
Okay.
Oh no. I mean, I've been asked that question before. And you know what? It's probably because I don't have kids. And I'm like, maybe if I was in a season of, kids, but I'm not. But I actually just viewed, I think her name is Tiffany D. Jackson. There was an event last night where her book was featured in Public Square in Cleveland, and she did a beautiful job depicting Black family. It was a message on Christmas, basically coming to the hood, and to encourage, kids in the inner city that, Santa Claus is there too. And it was so inspiring and so beautiful that, I could see myself doing something like that one day, but I feel like I would need to be in the season of kids. Like right
Yeah.
now, that's I'm like 20s, 30 something. Like that's my my group, my community, my tribe. Like
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's what I have access to right now.
Yeah, and I've been asked the same question, and I am in a season of kids. I have been in a season of
Yeah.
kids for like 20 years. So I have 5 kids, and my oldest is
Wow.
20, and my youngest is 5. And so, but I find it difficult to communicate some certain things to little kids. Like I can try, but it's I'd rather kind of talk to a larger audience, and so I do understand why that. And maybe if you do have kids one day, you kind of find the niche. But I do think it takes a special gift to be able to communicate certain lessons and teach kids and things like that. Even school teachers, I really give them a lot of props, because I don't think
A lot.
everybody can do that with kids.
Let me tell you, Sage the Coach, I had 2 days of substitute teaching and it whooped me. Okay. I feel like I got hazed. I think they were second graders, first graders, something, but I was on the phone with my friend and she's actually on here and she's a teacher. And I was like, girl, like, how are you making it? Like my feet hurt. I have to go to the bathroom. Like, I just was like, this is not my calling. Like, somebody put me in front of a computer because I can't do it.
Absolutely. So I have a kind of a little running joke that I'll say sometimes, but every time, because I do have a lot of kids, whenever I go to church, they always want me to volunteer in children's ministry. And I'm like, I want to get away from kids. Like I'm in with kids all day, every day. Like at church, let me get away from them for a little bit and send them to the other people. So no children's church for me. So
Yeah, I agree. I actually was at my friend's wedding a few weeks ago, and somehow I got stuck with a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old for a full hour.
oh
I
my
was like
goodness.
staring at the door for another adult to come. I was like, what is going on? Like, come on, somebody come through. Like, and they weren't bad, but they were just kids and the ages, I was like, how did I, the one who has the least kid experience, end up in this situation? I don't know.
Praise Warrior just tuned in. He said hi, you too. I mean, he or she, I'm not sure. But hello, thank you for tuning in. So
Hello.
yeah, but it even brings me back to, and we'll get to the story very shortly here, but with kids, because really we're all kids in God's eyes,
That's so
and
true.
then and so
true.
we when we're dealing with other kids, to me, especially a lot of kids, it's like, oh my goodness, how does God deal with the
Deal with
entire human
us.
race?
I don't have a mind for it. He's just too great. I can't
Yeah,
fathom it.
yeah, it's too much. So so let's get back to the book. So in the book, of course, we're not going to go through all the characters because it's a pretty lengthy book, but I definitely think it's worth it, especially like if you have a few minutes where you just want to sit down and relax. You can read about one kind of short story or novella, and
Right.
then read about the other one next time. And so the first character, Lisa, am I
Yes.
correct? Her name is Lisa.
Yes.
And so can you talk a little bit about Lisa and where your inspiration from Lisa came from?
Sure. Lisa is like the woman that I would want to have become, which I do have some things in common with her. I wrote that during a time period before I saw a lot of movement in my romantic life. And I'll just be 100%. I was just kind of like, God, like my life is so boring. I could write a better story, right?
Oh
And I
wow.
feel like, yeah, that's how I felt about it. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like he took me up on that.
Mm,
So
mm.
definitely I was inspired to write Lisa's story. And, she's in this transitional season of being in love with her ex. She's single parenting. She's not a believer yet when we meet her, but she has a beautiful older woman in her life who demonstrates the love of God without being religious or hitting her over the head with
Exactly.
it. She
Exactly.
just loves on her. Lisa doesn't have a lot of family in New York. She moved there to be with her husband. They're not divorced. And of course, she has a new love interest. And this
Mm.
is what I was just like, yeah, we're going to hook you up, Lisa. We're going to give you some options, okay? We'll give you some options out here. So then she has an amazing experience with that. Now, I don't want to ruin it because people may still, want
Right.
to read it, but it does take a little bit of a turn, which some people have given me their feedback on that, and they have
Mm-hmm.
not been in agreement. But I feel like I had a purpose to that.
Yeah.
And the purpose was to show that even though, there are amazing things about being a believer, there are still some sacrifices that we make, and there are still some things that happen that we don't fully understand. God's ways, like they're just higher than our ways. So, but ultimately, He can give us the desire of our heart. And so she experiences that as well. So Lisa was a conglomerate of things. She was the woman that I wanted to be. She had these experiences I wanted to have. But then God was like, I got you. And so He
Mm-hmm.
definitely has given me several of those experiences since. So He is the great author for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I like what you said about, of course, I don't want to give the ending of that short novella away, but I like what you said about, the older woman in her life. And I did notice that a lot of the characters that with in the story that are Christian, they don't come across in this kind of weird, overly religious, suffocating type of way. And I really like that because I do think that that's could be sometimes a problem for people, even in the Christian community, and how they display Christianity to people on the outside. But it made Christianity come across as very natural. This older lady, she was just very casual with it, just talking about what God has done for her. If I'm not mistaken, she was talking about a date that she went on. She was kind of playful and things like that. And I
Yes.
really like that image of Christianity in that way. You don't have to force things down people's throat. You don't have to you just kind of reflect Christ, reflect the love of Christ and things like that. And I think even when it comes to correction, because I see a lot of people as Christian who just want to correct people. You're doing that wrong. You're not supposed to be doing that. You're not supposed to be doing that. And I feel like that comes with when you have a relationship with the person. Like you can't just go around telling everybody what they're doing wrong when you don't necessarily have a relationship with them, because everything about God and our relationship with God comes from growing our relationship with Him. You're gonna take correction from somebody you have a relationship with much more than you will take it from somebody you don't know. And so I really like that she was kind of pushing her towards, God, knowing that she wasn't a believer, but kind of nudging her towards God, but doing it in a way of love, that she wasn't overbearing and things like
Right.
that. So I really, really appreciated that depiction, especially in an older woman, because a lot of times
Yeah.
we kind of lack examples and things like that. And then you draw the comparison to when she's interacting with kind of younger women, that she comes across as kind of the mature one and stuff like that. So I really, really like
Yes,
that in the
that's
story.
true.
So
Look at
yeah.
you right about that. I didn't even think about that. You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
And that was another thing I wanted to show about Lisa, that even though she didn't have this spiritual relationship yet, she had a solid enough identity. She had standards, she had values. It was just that faith component that wasn't there yet. But she still upheld herself in a certain way of class. And that's why she was able to attract someone like Joe, who was a strong believer because of who she was eternally, that shined through.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's a great point too. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so again, great point. Is like, we expect Christianity to, it's like saved people and unsaved people. And there's this huge demarcation between us. And you, in order to cross one, you have to be a certain way or do a certain thing. But you don't have to be a Christian to make good choices. You don't have to be a
Yeah.
Christian to be a good person. And it's not that when you come over to Christ now, you have to throw all of those things away and kind of start over and things like that. And so God will use those things to build upon, to help you grow spiritually. So I like that you pointed that out as well, because again, a lot of times in Christianity, you have a lot of judgment of people who are not Christian. And that's a lot of time misplaced, because they still can have those qualities. They're still a part of God, as we were talking about
Yes.
before. And they can still have things that can be built upon if you have the patience and the time and things to work with them, which is also displayed in throughout the story. Because like you said, she was able to attract Joe. She had this older woman that was in her life. So it's not necessarily about Christian or non-Christian, but where you are maturity wise, because that's still a part of being a Christian too. It's actually God growing us up a little bit more. So
And
I really like that.
there are plenty of Christians that are not mature. I just
Oh
want to
yeah,
throw that out
absolutely.
there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I just
Yeah.
want to throw that out there.
Unfortunately, the case is that most of them are not mature more than they are mature. A lot of times
No
people get
comment.
a false sense of where they are on the maturity level because of Christianity. But like we're not going to go out into that. We'll stick to the
Yeah.
book. Yeah. And
And I
so,
do appreciate you reading the book. I just want to put that out there.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, when I have people come on the show, sometimes I kind of run out of time and I don't get to read as much of it as I would like. But I do want to. I'm a writer first, so I do want to read and see what you're talking about, and just one thing about a writer is that you need people to read it, and so I like to
Yes.
extend that to my fellow writers to make sure I read their stuff. So yeah. Okay, so Jay Lewis says amen to it, says amen. That is word says you don't have to be a Christian to make good choices. Absolutely. And then you have, or Praise Warrior says, or Christians can judge that you're not going. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And let me point that out really quickly, and then we can kind of move on to another story, see what you have to say about what I'm going to say. Is that everybody's at different seasons of growth. And I do like that you kind of depicted that too. So it's not a matter of like, yeah, she's just getting started, and that's okay. Too many times we even judge ourselves and we think that we're not doing something right, or that we're messing up here and doing that. But God understands that our growth is a process. And so it's not about necessarily not doing Christianity right. To me, doing Christianity right is just continuing. Just keep trying. It's not about you doing things in a perfect way or coming across a perfect way or always getting everything right, but being willing and open to learn and continue to grow. And I really feel like that's all God really expects from us, is to do that genuinely from our hearts. And so I like that, even though she is a new Christian, she is kind of has people in her life who gives her permission to be a new Christian, and not kind of put the pressure on her of like, because you're a Christian, now you gotta do all this stuff, do all that, and fit this mold that they have of Christianity. So I really like that as well.
And I was intentional to give her Joe and to give her Aunt Sylvia, to surround her with relatable, humble believers who were in touch, in touch with humanity. I didn't want it to be a churchy thing or religious thing. I wanted it to be a community thing, because that's
Yeah.
been my experience. I
Yeah,
wanted it
that's
to be
good.
fellowship and relationship, doing life together.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that's good. And I think a lot of times, especially with new Christians, that's lacking a lot, even in the church, that people don't have that kind of relationship / mentorship to kind of help them grow and give them space and permission to grow, like I said, and not coming down on you because you don't understand something or you're doing something wrong and things like that. Because that's really what a relationship is about. And that's how God treats us. I mean, like we just talked
right.
about. all the people in the world. I'm sure, like we can deal with. I have 5 kids. You dealt with 4 kids for an hour. He deals with. If he was not patient with us and allowed us space to grow and mess up, we wouldn't be here. So we have to extend that same thing to other people. Yeah. So, yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. So let's move on to Joe. Joe is so what's your and that's the next story in the book, you guys, and we're not going to go through the whole thing, but I just kind of wanted to give people a taste of what the book is about. And so we have from the first novella or short story. Which one do you consider the first book? Is it a novella or a short story? I want to use the right terminology.
Definitely Lisa's a novella. Joe might be long enough. The first 3 stories were the ones that I just was really writing a lot. So the first 3 are probably all novellas. And then I started realizing I like it shortness, and I got a little bit better at that. So
Okay. So so the first one is about Lisa, and it kind of talks about where she is in her life and things like that. I really like a lot of descriptions that you use, and you paint the scene very, very well. Like you can really imagine, and even sometimes some of the details that you would eventually say about the scene, I was already imagining them. So when you would say add a detail, it was like, oh, so my imagination is right on track with what's going on. So I think you did that very well. So in the first story, you have Lisa, and we're kind of going through her and her life and where she is and what she's going through. And then she meets this guy. And then, we're not going to give away the ending on that one. But then in the second story, we get a closer look on the guy that she meets, which his name is Joe. So we get a peek into his life and what's going on with him. So what is your inspiration and the same type of information you gave about Lisa? How do you feel about your character, Joe?
Well, my thing was the reason I wrote Joe, because if you notice, these are the only 2 stories that intertwine in the whole book. But the reason I wrote Joe was because I had to hook him up. So that was like my intent. Now, in writing his story, it was so fun because it was the first time I wrote from a male perspective. So it was like, it's like, okay, this is the male's perspective. It was so fun to unfold him more because initially we only saw him interacting in a romantic relationship and we saw some of his characteristics that were spiritually based. But this time it was like, oh, Joe at work, Joe with his boys, Joe at the game, Joe at the club. It was like, let's see where we can take this, and definitely fun with the jargon, the male jargon. I had a male friend kind of, help me out with that a little bit. But the thing about Joe is I wanted him to depict the typical African-American middle-class male. So, and a lot of times when we're in middle class, we know how to move in both cultures, whether it's westernized culture, corporate culture, and urban culture, street culture. So Joe is not naturally an inner city type of dude. He makes some poor decisions in the book, which demonstrate that. However, he is still very much in tune with his community. He volunteers at the Urban Youth Center, and so he's still, he's playing ball with his boys in New York. So he's still living that life where he's moving back and forth between these 2 worlds. So that was one thing I wanted to show with him. Definitely wanted to show more of the behind the scenes one-on-one relationship he had with God, and just how this one area he had a desire. So I've witnessed a few men in my life who I've watched deal with that desire of being single, deal with that desire of wanting their spouse. And so I just really wanted to portray that and channel, like, this is a good dude who has this desire, who loves God. So yeah, that was my thing with Joe. And then the bonus for me was his connection with a young man who was previously incarcerated. So out of the whole story, that was the thing that kind of hit me the most, and just his own mentorship and tenderness to the heart of God being manifested with that. But just depicting, Black men needing Black men, Black men being mentors, Black men needing each other, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that was really good. And I don't know if it's the female in me, but because I was, even as we diving into Joe, I'm like, okay, she's writing from a male perspective. I like how is this gonna play out?
Yeah.
But even from the first when he comes with talking to Lisa, I was like, is he on some garbage? Is he not on some garbage? Let's.
I love it. I love she's suspect. That's when you
Yeah.
know you in the story and you start analyzing these folks like they in real life. Like,
Yeah.
what's
So
happening?
so I was just waiting to kind of, judge and like, okay, is he on some garbage or not? And then in the second story, I was kind of like still seeing, okay, is he on some garbage? Then I got kind of comfortable, like, okay, he's actually a decent guy. So I again, that's just a female perspective, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad that you kind of depicted him in a non kind of typical, what we expect, because of course I'm looking like, is he on some garbage? Because why?
Yeah.
Because as a
Right.
woman, that's kind of what you experience, what you go through, and then we end up getting these ideas about men and sometimes prejudging them and things like that unfairly.
Right.
And I like that, even though I was suspect, because of my experience, that he didn't turn out to be a jerk. So it was
Yeah.
like,
And there
yeah,
are some jerks in this book, but
yeah.
I wanted to do a more balanced perspective and, not the man bash or anything. They out
Exactly.
there. So,
Yeah, exactly. But I think that that's good, and I think that that's fair, that you show both sides,
yeah.
because again, we usually get so caught up in what we think and our preconceived ideas, that I think a lot of women don't give decent men a chance because of their
Yeah.
preconceived ideas about who he is and what he does, or are you for real, are you not for real, and things like that. So I like that he turned out to be a decent guy. And so when you talked about, now one thing, well, two things, I did think that the rest of the stories are was going to be disconnected because of Lisa
Gotcha.
and Joe, and so I was kind of looking for that connection. And then when it
Mm-hmm.
didn't come, I'm like, oh, cool. So maybe this is a different story. So that was one
Mm-hmm.
thing, but it doesn't make the book good or bad. But I was just
Yeah.
expecting that. Yeah. Another thing is that when you talk about when he was the second story, when it starts, Joe, he meets, is it Nina, right?
Yes. Nina.
I didn't understand where we were. I'm like, is this before? Because
Hmm.
I was thinking,
Okay. And the
and
timeline of him with Lisa. Okay.
in my suspicion, in my skepticism, I was like, is he doing this behind Lisa's back with Nina?
You done created a whole nother story. You trying to make a novel. What's going on? That is
Yeah.
hilarious.
So, but then as the story went on, I figured out, oh, this must either be before her or after her, and things like that. So I wasn't really sure, but it's good to have that because you're kind of engaged and kind of wanting to
Mm-hmm.
have your questions answered in the story. So I was kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, what's going on with that? And
Now
so
the
go ahead.
the way you know the timeline is when he actually brings Nina to Devon's.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
when it's clear, like, okay, this is after.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then like when you say you wanted to hook him up and things like that, I think that was really,
Yeah.
really good. Yeah. So, now the part of the story where you're talking about him getting involved with the being a mentor to this other guy, can you talk? I mean, I kind of can imagine what your inspiration is behind that, because I thought that that was very unique, or I'm not sure. So I want to know what you were thinking, because
Yeah.
it was important to show the mentorship and all that type of stuff. And it kind of like took me by surprise a little bit. And I even thought that Joe, which I think you meant to do intentionally, was a little bit naive. And
Yeah.
so can you talk about and flesh it out a little bit, your thinking behind this mentorship, and then plus this naivety that he kind of shows, even though he is, by all appearances, a mature Christian in the story.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that for me, it was more of
Hey, Rob.
when God, I've had so many experiences, and this is the only word I can kind of use, is like of God assigning people to me, or
Mm,
there being some type of assignment with building a relationship with someone, or being a mentor, or having these encounters, purposeful encounters in their lives. And that's what I wanted to demonstrate, was just this
okay.
aspect of God assigning people. And because he is more mature, he would be in that mentorship state. However, he didn't have the necessary street smarts. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think God, like in my perspective, God uses all things. So like in my perspective, it would be like a character like Joe. God will look at him and say, okay, so he's naive in this area, but I'll work it for his good, ultimately to teach
Mm,
him that
mm,
even in your shortcomings, I can make it work for your good. But I did feel like sometimes God walks us through certain circumstances, that negative things can happen and yet he gets the glory. So I think of
Mm,
Jesus going into the wilderness. It's like
mm,
it says that the Holy Spirit led him into the wilderness. But what happened in the wilderness? He was tested,
mm,
and so he faced the enemy. And so with Joe, he was sensing I need to help his brother, but in the natural it will be like, nah, girl, like dude, like keep your distance, like stay out of this mess, or
mm,
don't move that way.
mm,
However, some things are just out of the box again, the way that
mm,
God uses, where
mm.
he understands and foresees it. It really was to show Earl, like this is the level of love. This is the level of mercy, like putting myself in harm's way for you. Like it was a demonstration of love in a way that he'd never seen before.
Wow, wow. I was not expecting you to say that. That's really, I mean, that's really deep because a lot of the time, well, first thing is that we get this idea sometimes as mature Christians. I've been a Christian for almost 20 years, so I would definitely consider myself a mature Christian, but does that mean you have it all together? No, you do not, you know. And
Yeah.
so that's a little bit of like my thing about outside the box because God is always going to stretch you in areas like we a lot of times we focus on what we're good at. We don't really pay as much
Yeah.
attention or want to pay attention to the areas that we need help in. And a lot of our Christian walk is about God showing us those areas that we need to grow in. And a lot of times we either don't want to see them or we innocently just don't see them at all. And so I like what you're saying about he does come across as a mature Christian and he's middle class. It seems to be
Mm-hmm.
educated, has a nice career, but there's still room to grow, and there's always room to
Right.
grow, and we always have to be open to the different things that God wants to grow in us. And so I
Mm-hmm.
like that. And then also what you're saying about again, we go back to the judgmental Christian thing because it would have been very easy for him to be in the place that he is as a middle class, educated, mature Christian to judge this other guy and say,
Right.
"Well, you're in this mess because you did this to yourself, or you're your own problem, or you just need to become a Christian." And I mean, I've seen a lot of that. And then, oh, I'm not
Yeah.
helping you. You got yourself in that mess. You have to get yourself out. But it was in his naivete that he was able to
Mm-hmm.
actually help him in a way that some people who might have been more knowledgeable would not have been open to
Right.
doing. Yeah.
Right. Like
So,
I'm like, well, that, and even Nina was like, I don't know, So it's
yeah,
like I would be like, I don't know, you really hearing God. Like I would really have to hear God because for me it would be like this ain't wisdom,
yeah, yeah,
So but
yeah,
he heard it and God used it, and so ultimately it was to help someone else.
yeah. And that's amazing. That's amazing that you broke that down like that. And so even a lot of times, another thing that kind of stands out to me is, um, I'm sorry, God is like we might think that God is putting us in a position to help somebody else, but God's lessons not only are he says he has a double-edged sword, the word of God's like a double-edged sword. His lessons are also double-sided lessons because a lot of the times what God is using you to do to someone else is also a lesson for you as well. And so a lot of times people who look like they're in higher authority positions think that they're just helping, and not realizing that God is also using those things to help you grow as well. And people who don't see that can become arrogant and feel like,
Yeah.
well, I got it together. I'm helping you. But no, there's a lesson
Right.
in it for you as well. So I really think
And
that that was a good depiction.
I do, thank you. I do see him demonstrating that when he breaks down, he's talking to Anita, and he's thinking like, I'm never going to do this again. Like there's this presumption that he's recognizing, like, okay, and I can identify with that of being too presumptuous and just needing to take a step back and be humbled. And it doesn't matter how mature you are, like you've never arrived, and
Mm,
so God
mm.
is always going to, if He loves us, chastise us.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly. And so even at the end when he got in all this trouble, I could just see him like, oh my goodness, I should have never listened to this dude. I mean, I've never been in trouble like this and all of that. And then boom, he gets the letter like, you actually really helped me, and it's like,
yeah,
wow. Okay. So yeah. So that was
yeah.
I like that. Um so is there like I understand the mentorship dynamic, and we talking a lot about black culture, and of course the prison system and black men getting in trouble and things like that is a reoccurring theme in our culture and society. And so what was your thinking behind bringing that aspect into the story in comparison to a more, I mean, I know you talked about mentorship, but I'm just kind of want to know your thoughts a little bit more on that, like that dynamic between a mature middle class educated Christian man, and then you have this kind of guy who's gotten himself into trouble and things like that. Oh, well, let me ask you this really quickly. Was the guy setting, maybe I shouldn't say, I'll ask you that later.
Was
Okay.
he setting him up?
Yeah.
That was not my intention. I could see
Okay.
that could have been a thing, but I didn't have that intent writing it. It was
Okay.
more of, he saw something in Joe. Like, he barely knew Joe, but
Yeah.
he saw something in him, which was the light, which was a healthier lifestyle that he gravitated towards, because he met all those dudes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Joe was the one that he gravitated to, and then Joe kind of checks him in the club on standards. It was just like something different about Joe, and he wanted a different life, but
Mm.
he couldn't seem to get out of his old life.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw him being more desperate to reach out for someone that was in a better place than he was. It was where he wanted to be, but he still was
Okay.
struggling. That's how I
Okay.
looked at it.
Okay. Because I was like, did he do this on purpose? No, anyway. See me,
You
I
be
don't know.
trying to make
Yeah.
whole novels, and it's a short story. I can't do all that. If I had a whole book, yes, I could have did something.
So I mean, I don't know. Maybe I watched too much TV or something, but I'm like, all
I
my
just love
intent.
that you were in it. You were in it, so I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah. So what was the dynamic or your thoughts behind kind of that comparison between almost like the two worlds? You talked about Black people having to live in two worlds, but you kind of show the
Yeah,
two worlds in those characters, which is a Black middle class educated Christian Black man compared to this more urban kind of in some
yeah,
trouble.
lower
Yeah.
income,
Yeah.
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 Well, I wanted to just show that we're not too far from either of those worlds. Like, I would consider
Mm.
myself middle class, educated, da da da. But there's lots of people in my circle and in my life who are more in the urban city, lower income sector. And definitely my family members, the people who've gone before me, have paved the way for me to have these opportunities. So I just
Mm.
feel like I
Mm.
wanted to show that even if you're in this space, you're not too far from the other spaces, because as Black people, we just got situated to where we are homeowners and business owners and all that stuff. So,
Yeah, I would say we still in a process of getting situated. We're
yeah,
not totally situated yet. Yeah,
yeah,
but absolutely. And I think a lot of the times it's just human nature. We forget, that we're not very far from the civil rights movement. Like, it hasn't really
yeah,
been that much time has passed. We've had some changes that have come that it's not so much in our faces like it probably was for people 70, 80
yeah,
years ago. But Martin Luther King could still be alive. Like, he's not
yeah.
so
That's
old that he
crazy.
would be dead. So we need to really, keep these things in the forefront of our minds, which I think sometimes becomes a problem. And it's not just with our life situations in society, but even God, because we sometimes struggle to keep God in the forefront of our minds. But we have to keep these things in the forefront of our minds so that we can act accordingly and take advantage of opportunities or even help fellow Blacks when they're in a bad situation. Because a lot of the times you have Blacks that might have arrived, so to speak, and then they want to judge the ones who appear as troublemakers or in jail, especially if it's not experience that they've had. And so even with this whole racial tension that has been going on in America for, I mean, not just recently, but more so within the past couple of years, you hear a lot of people, Black people say, some Black people say racism doesn't exist. I don't know what other Black people are talking about. They just lazy, blah, blah, blah. And then you have people who are down in the dumps. It's like, what are you talking about? Racism does exist. And so I really like that, you're showing both sides of that. It's like you're showing how Black people in the middle class can come together. And like you said, we're not too far from, what they say, 6 degrees of separation or something like that. So we're
Yeah,
always connected to our fellow Blacks in some way. And I really like that Joe didn't judge him for that, that Joe
yeah,
had an open heart and open mind towards him and tried to help him, even though he got a little bit of trouble. Some people might say, see, you shouldn't even help him. Now that's why you
yeah,
got in trouble. But at the end, it turned out to be something that was spiritually beneficial. And then it also shows that sometimes, it takes God to kind of help us to be sympathetic to people that's in situations that we feel like we would never be in or we have no
yeah,
familiarity with and things like that. So I really think a lot of those kind of introspective and questions and just analyzation of society in general was really evident in the story to me. So yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And this is just a side note. Those very first two stories are going to be inspiration for future books. So that environment, some of those characters, they're definitely popping up in my novel. I'm working on my first novel, which I hope will be released next year. And I just see other stories being spin-offs. So I'm glad you like those.
Yeah, and so this is my first time hearing of a novel. So can you talk about that a little bit?
It's been a journey. I have not ever thought of myself as a novelist. I think this is nuts, but it's happening. I actually started the novel during the pandemic, so I was simultaneously writing urban stories and got most of that done when I started the novel. So I kind of like spit out my first two books. Like writing for me has never been a difficult thing, and the story itself is there, but there's a lot of editing. It's like a whole new world of editing to me. I submitted it to my editor,
Yes.
and I was like, wanted to cry, and I couldn't even look at it for a month. I was like, Lord, am I really supposed to do this?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah.
I'm back at it, and it's definitely a joy. But it's gonna be geared towards the youth. It's gonna be a young adult Black Christian fiction. One of the themes in my life is being having a journey in faith very young.
Okay.
And that was a very pivotal time of my friends' lives and my life, and I wanted to display that in print. So stay tuned. I have a newsletter that I'll be updating people on that. I also have an ebook coming out that'll help those who want to self-publish. I'm hoping to get that out in the next few weeks. So
okay, great. So whenever
couple of book projects.
yeah, whenever you want to, get that out, and I can post it on my platform as well. I do like to support authors. I'm a self-published author myself, so I do understand it's rough out here for us self-published authors. Yeah,
because we can have good work out, but people don't know about it, so they don't support. So it really is getting that awareness and knowledge so people can support.
Exactly. But so I think that's great. I mean, I'm not, especially for young people, I think it's good for them to have something relatable to read, music to listen to, and things like that. Christian music has changed a lot over the past 20, 30, 40 years, where it's kind of a little bit more appeal to young people. Of course, some people think that, you're making it too worldly and things like that. But music was created by God. People did not create music. So you can always take something that God created and reclaim it for him. And so I like to know that, my kids are heavy readers. And so a lot of times I'm having to scan through what they're reading, making sure there's not stuff in there. So the fact that I know now of an author, a Christian author for young people, especially urban, I think that is definitely right for the time, because we need more of that kind of stuff out there. So
it's happening.
Yeah. So congratulations on your upcoming novel. I wish you all the success in that. And I can definitely see this being like I don't want to say a soap opera, but like a TV show.
Yes, I have heard that a few times for sure.
Yeah. So congrats on that. And you guys make sure you check out her book. The link should be below in the comments.
Hold it up.
Yeah. For her.
It might be backwards.
Yeah. No, yeah. And so the link should be in the comments below. You guys can click on that and purchase her book on Amazon. And other than your novel, do you have anything else coming out that you want to let people know about, or anything with your other businesses and things like that?
Well, I do my blog weekly, so you can sign up for that, betterthanwine.net. There's a blog post every Monday morning, and then the website for my books also has a blog portion. I also have a newsletter, which I mentioned, that comes out monthly. So in addition, I have events. I have an event today. If you're in the Cleveland area, go to my Instagram. You'll see the event is off St. Clair, and it's a panel of entrepreneurship. So I'll be selling books and signing books there today from 4 to 8. My Instagram is at Nicole.D.Miller. And I have tax season coming up. So that's going to be its own thing, in addition to my ebook, working on my novel, and then doing some editing for others. So
yeah. Wow. Great story, great book. You got a lot of stuff going on. And I commend you. It's nice to see a fellow sister doing something, good for not only the community, but also Christians and things like that. So, you have my admiration. So I thank you for that.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. I appreciate it. It's all by faith. Like I said, I was bored at work reading blogs. Who knew I'd be like upcoming novelist? Not me. So
Yeah. So you guys, the link below, I have her website scrolling across the bottom of the page, but I will also put in the comments under the video. The book should be there, and also don't forget to sign up for my Christmas giveaway, where I will be giving away some books and some gift cards and some free coaching sessions. And Nicole will be back with me very, very soon. She's going to be on my Christmas or New Year special, where I will be speaking with past guests about important life lessons they learned from 2021. So you guys make sure you stay tuned for that. And I think that's it for today. Did you have any last things you wanted to say before we hang it up?
just that I thoroughly appreciated your promo. You did an amazing job
Oh,
with those
thank you.
graphics. Like
Thank you so
so
much.
dope. Yeah, amazing.
Thank you so much. I got a little bit of graphic design skills. They have come in handy during this podcast. So thanks for that.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
who is here really quickly before we go? Praise Word says, looking forward to reading this book and all the others to come, Nicole. Thank
Thank
you so much.
you. Thank you
And
so much.
yeah, thank you too. And then earlier there was a LaShawn McCain who signed in and said, thanks you, Stephanie, for inviting
Oh,
me. And
oh,
thank you for
those are my
tuning in
people.
as well. Yeah,
Thank
exactly.
you guys. Also I will say I lost my train of thought. It was something important. Oh well. I'll message you if you need to put it out there. I can't
Yeah.
remember.
Okay.
But maybe I just wanted to thank everybody that came through, because a lot of those names that you listed are my people. So
Oh, that's
I
great.
totally appreciate the support. Yeah,
Oh,
for sure.
absolutely. Support is golden. All right. Thank
Yeah.
you. All right. Thank you, guys. You have a good weekend and tune in next Saturday at 12 p.m. again, where I will be doing a show about parenting. We're going to be talking about how parenting can teach you about yourself and your relationship with God. And so I'm really interested in doing that because I have 5 kids. And so that's a big part of my life. So, so thank you, guys. You have a great weekend and see you next week.
Bye.